Hi, I'm Matthew King. We're here at Frontier Park at the Arboretum in Erie, PA with the cast of There Are No Goodbyes. Go ahead and introduce yourselves, guys.
I'm Ellen Wojciechowski, and I play Alice, the diner waitress.
Hi, I'm Don Kirsch, and I played Jimmy. I was Oliver's next door neighbor and sort of a father figure to him now, and more later about that.
My name is Michael Meyer. I play Ray, again, one of the diner guys. There's the troika of us that meet, and Matt comes in to join us periodically.
I'm Michael Burns, and I play John, another one of Oliver's diner friends. What drew me to the project was I heard about it, I got a message from a friend on Facebook, and also I saw a notice in the showcase for auditions. And I was very attracted to the idea of doing a film for the first time. I've done some theater locally, but this was the first opportunity to do a film. And the opportunity to do a film here locally, I think also was, I thought, possibly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I've done a lot of theater here in town. I've done a few shows at the Playhouse, several shows at All and Act Theater, as well as the Station Dinner Theater, and participated in Gannon's Shakespeare Summer Nights shows as well.
I also am a first-timer for film, along with Mike Burns. And again, I think my reasons for doing the film are similar to what Mike's were. I have not done film before. I've done theater for about 20 years. In fact, a lot of the folks that were involved in this project have been on stage with me at one time or another. But it was an opportunity to do something I hadn't done before, and to do something that required a little bit of a different skill set than what I tried to develop in my theatrical acting. I have to tell you, it was really an interesting project. Certainly, I'll try to do the same thing again if we do any more films in the area here. I'm a rank amateur. I'm not about to run out to California and try to make my mark or anything like that, but it was really enjoyable to do the film. I appreciate the opportunity for it.
What drew me to the film was two words: John Lyons. I was lucky enough to be in his last film, Schism. I enjoyed the whole process very much, and I knew if John ever did another film, I would definitely want to be part of it. So when the auditions came up, I went down to try out, and I knew that whatever part I was offered, I was willing to take it. So actually, it's been a good experience, not only with Schism, but with this film also for me.
I've been acting since I was in 6th grade. I was Mrs. Santa Claus in a school play. And my husband was in the military for 20 years, so we moved around a few different places, and I was able to do some stage work in different community theaters that we lived. I've done some stuff here at the Playhouse and at
Director's
the
Circle.
Director's Circle. I did some stuff there too. And the old Roadhouse, which is no longer with us, sadly. I had done one film before this one that was a short film, and I was in the very end, and it was a lot of fun. And we were in the middle of rehearsals for the Christmas show at the Playhouse, and one of my castmates said, "Hey, are you going to go try out for that show, for that movie, There Are No Goodbyes?" I'm like, "Well, I don't know anything about it," and the auditions were right upstairs, so I went upstairs after rehearsal on a Saturday and tried out. It was fun. I've really enjoyed it a lot. It was a lot of fun.
What do you think the biggest differences are between theater and film work?
You have do-overs.
Yeah.
You don't have do-overs in the theater, and just that you have to do it so many times, and you still keep it fresh every time.
Yeah. I think something else that was really different was the audition process. I hate auditions with a passion. Theatrical auditions, generally you do a cattle call audition where you maybe have 20 or 50 or 100 people all auditioning one night, and you march in, you do a monologue, do a song if it's a musical, do a movement if there's some movement involved, and I just don't like it. I'd rather do 100 opening nights than one audition. But it was so much different to do the audition for the film, where you would come in, read a part, and go out, come back in and read the part again, maybe with different people, and I think the whole process of being able to mix the chemistry with different people during the audition process, I think made it certainly made a stronger film because you were able to see how people interacted with each other on film. But it also was so much easier because you didn't have to have prepared auditions, you know, and you could be a little more spontaneous and not have to worry about making a mistake during the audition.
With a play, it's a very short, intense period where you rehearse for hopefully at least 3 or 4 weeks, and then you have the run of the show, which goes for 3 or 4 weekends. You have about 10 or 11 performances, and with a play, the reaction and the feedback is immediate from the audience. Laughs, applause, what have you. If you make a mistake, you just keep going and hope, and there's another show the next night. With a film, the process is much longer and more drawn out, and obviously the reaction is delayed. The reaction here, we're not going to know what the reaction to this film is going to be until next year sometime, next spring. As you can do you can do retakes. So if you make a mistake, you just say cut and do it again. So if you make a mistake, it's no big deal. But the reaction is not immediate, but the process is much longer and more drawn out. And doing this play, it's been a great opportunity, and I'm just grateful to be a part of it. It's just I've gotten just a glimpse of the enormous amount of work that goes into it. So it's a longer, more drawn-out process with a lot of work and a delayed reaction. But then at the end, when it's all over, this piece will be preserved on DVD forever, and we can watch it again and again if we want to. With plays, some of them are recorded, but a lot of them are not, and all you have is memories. You can't watch it again. So
I think
a lot
big
of interesting
difference
differences
in
there.
plays too is in most of us who've stood on a stage have not necessarily repeated the lines the way they were supposed to be written. And you get out on stage, and when you blow something, it gets pretty lonely out there. And it can get lonely for an awful long time, or at least it seems like an awful long time. The difference in film is if you get caught in mouth or if you get tongue-tied, you cut it and you start over again, which is really, in its way, it's much, much easier than doing theater work. The other side of the coin is that you have to recognize, for continuity's sake, if you do a scene, the next time you do the scene, you've got to hold your coffee cup the same way at the start, and you've got to move your head the same way when you're going through different dialogue. So there's a different kind of work involved in movies than there is in plays. Plays because they are of the moment. You can trade lines a little bit, or you can move differently night to night in the performance. But at least in my case, I was pretty conscious during filming that, you know, if I looked at you when you're speaking, and then I looked at you when you're speaking, if we did the scene again, I couldn't reverse that. I couldn't reverse that sequence.
I found that even after 30 years of doing community theater, no matter even with all the experience I've had, I always got nervous. I could never get over that. And that's why I think I've enjoyed film so much the last couple of years, is that I've lost that nervousness because I know I have an opportunity to do it again. Back in the 50s and 60s, I used to work the nightclub circuit back in Buffalo, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland. Had a dance team and musical comedy act. And I had never had any problem on stage of being nervous at all, because I was in contact with the audience, right, face to face. But somehow theater was altogether different for me, and as much as I loved it and wouldn't give it up, I was nervous every time I hit that stage. And it cost me sometimes with missed lines or forgetting what seemed like 10 minutes was only 30 seconds, but I still won't give it up. But I really enjoy films much more now at my age. So,
you probably heard other people talk about it. When you're on stage, everything has to be big, because if you're playing the top row in the balcony, if you're going to make your eyebrows go up, they got to really go up for people to see them. It's much smaller when you're doing film, because you can come right in on a one shot, and you can manipulate a little bit easier. You can give a little more nuance to what you're doing.
I can remember my first stage appearance, the first couple, And I was used to working to the audience, and I was playing right to the front row there. The director said, no, no.
The fourth wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was quite a shock to me because suddenly it got difficult then.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are a lot of different ways, I think, to deliver a line. When you're doing a play on a particular night, you only deliver it one way, and that's it. That's what the audience is going to see. With the film, it seems that the director and or the editor has a big role in deciding what the final product is going to look like and to sound like. So you can do 10 takes of the same scene, the same line, and say it 10 different ways. Ultimately, it's going to be up to the director as to which take he or she is going to use and which interpretation or which delivery of the line is going to be used.
You know, something else you talked about, Mike, the immediacy of a live audience. There's immediacy and there's also some variety to it. You can do the same play the same way 2 nights in a row and get totally different reactions from the audience. And you have to be able to adjust your performance as you start to feel what the audience is going to be like to try to get them engaged with the performance. And in film, you have to almost try to anticipate what somebody sitting in front of a screen is going to look at and how they're going to react to it. And for me, I haven't got the experience, and it's much more difficult to try to anticipate if I do something in a certain way, how's it going to transmit itself across to an audience, because you don't hear or see or smell how the crowd is acting.
That's very interesting that you say that, though, because when we were shooting, that didn't occur to me at all. I didn't stop to think that about what an audience was going to think or how they were going to react when they saw a particular scene. I was just trying to focus on the scene, the lines, the fellow actors and the director and what we were doing. But that's interesting you say that, because in theater, yes, you're very aware of the audience and conscious of what the audience reaction is going to be. But I didn't find that was the case with shooting the film.
And I think you also count a lot on the director in a film,
Right.
in that they have to be the sounding board for what you do and how you do it. If your interpretation of a line or a role is a certain way, they have the entire production in their minds, and they understand how your little piece of the puzzle is going to fit in to try to make a cohesive whole. And I think there's a little bit more involvement of a film director, at least in my very limited experience, than on a stage director, because you are shooting a scene that's disjointed and not necessarily in sequence, and we really didn't get to see a lot of the other scenes, so we don't necessarily understand how our part fit into that
Right.
new part. So I think it's incumbent on the director, and certainly John helped us with this, it's incumbent on the director in a film to try to help an actor pull the character that will fit into what's being done. It doesn't necessarily limit your creative input to what you're doing, but it helps to steer you how you should be. You know, am I going to be a dope, or am I going to be a smart guy, or am I going to be a bad guy or a kind guy? You know, and you really don't have a strong feel for the vision of the director or the editor in films on how that's supposed to be. When you're rehearsing a play for 6 or 8 or 10 formal run-through dress rehearsals, you start to pull that all together very quickly. So I think it's a different environment there as well.
You touched on something, a good point, and that is that in a film, like for us, you and I especially, Mike, we had small parts, and we're the Dinor group, and we play one small isolated part in the film. And in a film, it's kind of harder to you don't really get a chance to see the whole, how our parts relate to the whole project, as you would in a play, because in a play you're sitting there and you get to see and hear the whole production. But here you feel there's a sense of isolation, because we're just a couple of characters with one rather isolated scene. But I thought that I think that and the director has to have a vision of what he wants, the whole to look like. But at the same time, I thought John gave us a great deal of freedom and autonomy to explore the characters and kind of flesh them out and make them who we wanted them to be.
Yeah, I personally like when I'm working with a director that lets you go out, and if you go too far, they pull you back. Rather than, it's my personality is such that I tend to maybe not go out as far as I should right off the bat, and I think it's a mark of a good director if they let you run with a part, and if you're a good actor, if you're doing what you should do, you should take a part past the extreme of where it should be, and then the director should pull you back to where it is. Because I think it's a lot easier to pull back a part than it is to push a part forward. You know, if you're over the top, they can take you down a lot more easily than if you're really down and low, to try to pull you back up to the ceiling that they want you to achieve as a character.
Especially in the theater, where, as you said, Mike, you have to shout and make sure that you're heard in the last row.
Yeah.
There's not as much room for nuance there, whereas in a film where you're mic'd up, you can give your performance more nuance, because you can modulate your voice, you can speak softly, you can whisper, as a lot of actors do in films. I notice a lot of films today, I can barely hear what they're saying. They're mumbling, and I'm saying, what are they saying? You can't do that in theater, but in film you can. But that's more like real life. In real life, people don't shout all the time to be heard by the last row.
Family.
Unless you're in your family.
Some of us do.
There is some more room for nuance there.
Yeah, it's true, and you know, I think as an actor, for all of us, for most of us, acting is a hobby for us. You know, we don't anticipate getting that one big call from Hollywood or anything. But I think a lot of us.
I do.
Yeah, I'm waiting.
Speak for yourself, Mike.
Maybe I'm the only one. I guess. But I think as you tend to try to pick parts for yourself, find out what you're going to be. You know, I'm never going to be a romantic lead. Too old and too ugly. But there are character parts that I could do, and you know, you tend to think, what kind of a part could I do, and you almost start to project into that part to try to develop it before it even appears on a casting call, and it would be fun to do movies again. I always wanted to play a bad guy in a movie, because you can. My opinion is you can do things as a bad guy with a nod of the head or an eyebrow raising, you know, or the set of your mouth or something like that, which certainly you can't do in theater because it's not visible. But you know, to be able to do something like that in a film, it's something I hope I can get the chance to do someday, simply because the challenge is going to be so much different, but the opportunity is going to be so much greater to really go out and try to develop something that you can telegraph from yourself to the audience.
Well, we filmed at the Lawrence Park Diner, which is actually the only diner on the registry in Pennsylvania, I believe.
The National
Registry around this area. And, well, we are the diner crew, so that's basically where we all film. I mean, I had a couple of the scenes with Dawn outside, but as for the most part with you guys, it was just basically in one setting, so.
Yeah, hopefully this will be seen by people in other parts of the country, and Erie is unique in that our diners are spelled Dinor, D-I-N-O-R. And I don't know of any place else in the country where they actually spell diner with an O.
Right.
But that's a little oddity of the region up here. But yeah, I thought it was interesting to see how well the folks at the Lawrence Park Diner actually went in all up for the production. Mm-hmm. They gave us total access to the place and closed it for business so that we could go in and film our scenes. And I think they had as much fun as we did. Watching the production.
A continuous amount of coffee.
Yeah.
Copious amounts of coffee.
Well, have you guys ever been to a diner in any other state? You know, when my dad would travel, he would say, if you wanted to get good food, you would go to a diner, because that was generally the place that had the best food in the town. I don't think that there's a lot of diners around anymore. We just went to one when we were down in New Jersey a couple of months ago, and it was huge compared to the one where we filmed. But it's like comfort food, and I think that it's kind of like it takes you back to before there was all the chain restaurants that there are everywhere now, if you wanted to go get a cup of coffee and breakfast, you would go to the diner. Or when we were in school, after you'd been out partying for an evening or gone someplace out and the diners were open late at night, you could go get something to eat and some coffee, and it was always really good coffee. And I think that, and you would see people from not just one particular kind of person, you would see all kinds of people at the diner. So I think it was like a little bit of your town, just not, not everybody that was like you. It was all kinds of different people that would go.
Well, Girard still has a diner. It's very, very similar, the same size as Lawrence Park, and it's been around for years and years and years. And we stop in on occasion yet for lunch or breakfast sometimes, and you'll always see the regular customers there. And people, when I worked many years ago at the bank, I used to stop in there for lunch. So it's the same type of atmosphere.
And actually, you bring up an interesting tie-in there. The characters that we play in this film are diner regulars. And we go there for lunch, presumably almost every day. And there are still people who do that in organizations and in companies like diners. You don't see it so much at the big chain places, but the guys that come in every day for lunch and they sit around and talk about baseball or their marriages or their kids or complain about the economy, and of course that's the characters that we played here, which I think are not atypical of what you see in diners across the country.
Diners are becoming, I think, a thing of the past. They're a slice of Americana that I think is fading, and they're a social setting. It's a place, like you said, Sue, where people hang out and talk. But people don't have their meals in diners so much anymore. Now we have them in fast food restaurants, or we do a lot of takeout or whatever. Diners provide the opportunity for people to sit and talk and socialize. And they're kind of a vestige of the past. And I think there's a connection between the Dinor, and there's also one in Wesleyville, I believe, here. The Dinor and the characters in the Dinor group, with the exception of Oliver and Jimmy, I think especially Mike, your character and mine, our characters, I think, are bristling against change. We don't like the change that's going on in the community, and I think we represent the past and the status quo the same way that the diner represents the past. And the changes that are going on in the film politically, with the runway extension that we complain about in the community college, that represents progress and change. And that's something that I think our characters are afraid of, and so we rail against it. So I think it's appropriate that our characters are in that setting, the diner, a representation of America's past, and we kind of represent the past and the status quo, and we're afraid of change, the change that's coming.
And I think we also represent a type of person that is not evolving anymore. Our parents had clubs, where their friends would get together and play cards once a month or twice a month. And I think maybe people of our generation, we had places that we went to. In this case, we're representing it as a diner. And it's a place where you can have social interaction with people, where you don't necessarily have to come in and have a scripted 20-minute discussion about something. It's not a sound bite like you see on news programs now or anything like that. You actually were able to get in there and share with each other your beliefs, and maybe if you felt willing to open up your feelings, and that really is not available anymore. I think the closest analogy you might find now is the social networking sites like Facebook, where people will share things with one another, but instead of a few people being in a room and sharing together, where you can actually get some empathy with each other. People tend to have like wholesale sharing of their emotions on Facebook, and maybe 500 people are going to see what they post, and it's a different type of sharing and intimacy than what I think the people in our characters represent. And I think maybe as well as some of the other things they complained about. I think maybe that deep in their hearts they said, you know, this is something that's going away, and they regret seeing it leave. They regret not our children not being able to have the same kind of opportunities to share with each other. The characters we play in the diner are kind of a microcosm of the right political perspective, at least in my opinion. We as Mike touched upon earlier, we don't really like the idea of some of the changes we're seeing. You know, public money being spent for a runway extension, public money being spent on some other projects that we think are of maybe tenuous value. Yeah, and the people that we have, at least the character that I have, and you guys can share if you want to. I've worked in shops for a lot of years, and the character that I had was a kind of an amalgamation of a lot of guys that I had seen in shops. These are guys that in some cases they came out of World War II or Korea or Vietnam, and they did the right thing. They served their country. They got married. They raised families, and they went into a shop where they could make enough money to support their families and to plan for the future and take care of themselves. And unfortunately, the economy being what it is, or the global economy being what it is, those kinds of jobs are just going away. They're being sent to low wage countries, and there's a certain amount of outrage, and I have to admit that I even share a little bit of it, that, you know, the country is not taking care of those people, and it doesn't have to take care of them with handouts and subsidies. All it's really got to do is level the playing field so that you don't end up with a low wage country coming in and scarfing up a bunch of the jobs that people, that average Joes kind of would do for a living. And I think there's an anger among those people like the ones we portrayed, and that anger is basically unaddressed by anyone that seems to have any power or authority. And that the lack of attention that people have given to them, I think, causes a lot of anger and frustration. And that's kind of where I was coming from in the little part that I had. You know, you certainly can't develop it a whole lot, but I think there's some basis behind what I felt that character should have. Mike, your character was not dissimilar to mine.
Our characters, I think, we're working class guys who part of the industrial generation in a time when our economy is shifting from an industrial to more of a service or information technology type of economy. And we're caught up in that, and we're sort of being swept away, and we're victims of that, if you will. And we're being laid off, and we have nothing to fall back on. So we're frightened, and we're scared, and we're angry about that. We grew up, I think, our characters, in a generation that pulled itself up by its own bootstraps, and we took care of ourselves, and we didn't expect any handouts from anybody. We were expected to take care of ourselves. And now we've been laid off, we find ourselves out of work, and we see in the political process that a government that is going to spend all this money on all of these projects, and we don't think that, we see it as a handout, and we're upset about that, and I think that causes some conflict between our characters and Oliver's character, and I think we eventually, there's an argument about that. But life is hard. I think the question was, what's life like in a blue collar city? Erie is basically a blue collar town, but there are many Northeast Rust Belt towns that are blue collar towns that are in the same predicament as Erie. Right. Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, larger cities, and so forth. So I would say life is hard regardless of where you live, whether it's Erie or the Northeast, the Rust Belt, or in the Southeast. The economy is changing. Unemployment is up. People are losing their jobs. That causes a lot of frustration and fear. And I think that is reflected in our characters. And we don't like to see this money just being spent in places that we don't think it should be spent. So it's a source of a lot of conflict in the movie. I think one of the themes of the film seems to be that people can help each other, and that everyone is part of the whole, perhaps without even knowing it. And that's something that our characters don't really seem to grasp. And that's an important lesson, I think, that Oliver learns through the film, and that's why as this begins to dawn on him, he realizes that that John's and Ray's views on that subject are antiquated, and I think Oliver kind of grows up and
in a way,
realizes
yeah, but
that.
it also my hook on that is he kind of has a takeaway from us that helps him. He kind of mans up a little bit and goes out, gets a job, gets a girl, does the things he needs to do, you know, and he, for whatever reason, good, bad, or indifferent, had kind of entered into a state of nothingness, you know. He just was kind of floating without any goals or objectives. And I think that, as we all do, you know, the older generation teaches the new generation. The older generation is never happy with the new generation. I think that's the way it should be, because that conflict creates change, and the change hopefully is going to be for the better. But I think in the case of our characters, you know, hopefully Oliver saw the good things that we brought to the table, the work ethic, the loyalty, the self-reliance, and took away the bad things that we had, the selfishness, the fear, the self-absorption, if you want to call it that.
And then I think there are two, as I see it, this is a multi-layered film with many themes, but two of them are that we can help each other. You know, we're all part of the greater whole, and we each play a role, and we can help each other, but at the same time, we have free will, and we can control our own destiny. So I think our characters are sort of the, you know, control our own destiny, pull yourselves up by your own bootstraps. But at the same time, I think the film tells us, and I think Oliver realizes that, you know, we're not alone out there. We're a community, and we have to help each other.
He learns that, I think. I think at the beginning of the film, he doesn't necessarily know that, because he actually is alone. You know, he's very alone. Don is a father figure to him, but even that father figure can't penetrate the loneliness. And as I said, you know, at some point, we all grow and we all learn from each other. And I think at some point that Oliver's character starts to understand that, you know, you can't totally discount what people try to tell you, but at the same time, there are other things that you can learn from those people that really have some value and have some merit and help you develop and grow as a human being.
I think they became more cynical. I think I'm taking a broader view, and I'm for community college, and I'm for the expansion of the airport, and I'm looking forward. Maybe that's the way I am, and I brought that to the character, but I think that was part of the idea of the film, my part of it. And I sort of tend to go with Oliver and thinking in the future.
Everything, all the conversations we have within the diner, he's learning more and more and progressing, and sort of, I feel like he takes your point of view, but at the same time he's starting to see his own path, and he doesn't agree with a lot of the things that are in the past and wants to move on with the future. And then obviously there's a little bit of a rift with our characters, and it leads to that. But at the same time, he doesn't look at your characters as, he still looks at you guys as his superiors, yet friends, and I don't think he wanted to get into a rift, but it just boiled over it to the point where, because everybody boils over at some point, that they can't, how do you want to put it, understand so well, but they're trying to. So
You think, do you see the guys at the diner as being your father and your uncles?
yeah, along the lines of that,
Yeah.
whereas your father's your right hand man and the one you look up to and everything, and he's always there, and then your uncles are always sort of giving you that little, you know, the cool uncles are like teasing you and giving you that push. And I feel like that's how our case was, because Oliver doesn't have a family. This is his family, so these are the people that he looks up to.
We still are of a generation that believes there are things that are right and things that are wrong. And in this country, that whether or not you believe one way or the other, there have been a lot of changes and a lot of challenges to right and wrong. I mean, you know, you would never, ever consider having a child out of wedlock. Now it's the standard thing to do, or if you're a Hollywood starlet, or a lot of kids today coming up, you know, there's nothing to it. There's no stigma to them, but to us, that would be a huge thing. And the same with gay rights and a lot of the things that we grew up being taught were wrong are now being changed to something else. And the sense that our value system is being discarded. What we thought was right and wrong is no longer being thought as right and wrong. And that, you know, irrespective of what your personal circumstances are, you know, you always, I think, want to carry forward with some continuity for the people that follow on afterwards. And you don't necessarily want to, we don't want to cut programs at the federal government because we want to make life hard for somebody, but we look at, and it's always been wrong to buy on debt. And now all we see is buying on debt, and we feel a powerlessness and that we can't control that, we can't affect that. So those who are essentially running our lives are taking our value systems and throwing them away.
Well, I think that it's representative of a conflict between the idea of, you know, pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps and self-reliance versus you know, spending on social programs. You know, to what extent do you do that? That's something that I think people debate about in their own personal lives, and as well as in our community. To what extent should government pay for certain things and help people, and to what extent are people expected to help themselves? I think that's the source of one of the sources of the conflict between our characters and Oliver's character. And I think we see the change coming. We don't like it. We see our way of life being coming to an end. We're angry about that. We're afraid. And at the same time, we see social money being spent on social programs, the Runway Extension, the community college, and we think, hey, we didn't have a chance to go to college. Why is the government helping people go to college? We didn't get that chance, right. So we resent that. So it's just part of a broader, I think, conflict between the idea of, you know, government helping people versus people helping themselves.
Or you guys are seeing things in just black and white.
Right.
Right and wrong. And Oliver is starting to see shades of color, and maybe that is something that, you know, you're realizing that maybe they're not always right with what they're saying.
Yes.
Right. Well, I think there's always an intergenerational change. We essentially, otherwise, except for Matt, we grew up in the Woodstock generation. And at the time that we were in high school or college, or shortly after college, there was huge social change in this country. Haight-Ashbury and hippies and free love and all the stuff that went along with it. Our parents looked at that with the same horror that we look at some of the things that we see today. But we seem to come out of it at the other end okay. I'm sure people in Oliver's generation, they're going to come out at the other end okay as well, but that doesn't alter the fact that you and I, being that generation before, doesn't look at it and say, my God, what's going to happen here?
I'm hoping it's going to be a very successful film, and I really feel, as much as I've been involved with it, that it's going to be a film everybody in the area is going to enjoy. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed for you, John, that it hits many, many film festivals and gets a lot of attention. So that's simply put, but that's how I feel about it.
I want to see the whole thing. I like to see the beginning, I want to see the middle, and I want to see the end. Because I'm still not even sure what's going to happen with the whole thing. Yeah. So I want to, because I was in 2 scenes, and I didn't really do that much in those 2 scenes. So I want to see, you meet Raina. I want to see that happen. And I want to see you guys fall in love. And I want to see all the people in the background doing what they do to make you guys fall in love. I love a love story, so, I'm really excited about that part.
I'm with you. I want to see how it cuts together. We've all been involved in projects where we get handed a script at the beginning and we read through and we think, okay, this is what it's going to be. And when you see the final production on stage or wherever you see it, it's different. And you know, a character that you think you had pegged, not even necessarily your own character, the character you think you had pegged right from the beginning, by the time the final product hits, all of a sudden that person is completely different. There's different nuances and depths, and I'm really interested to see how it develops relative to what I read in the script.
Yeah, ditto. Yeah, I like, as I said, with a play, you can you can see the whole production within a couple of hours. I've read the script. We had a read through, but I haven't seen the rest of the piece
I'm assuming
performed.
there's been a couple of script changes and like minimal stuff that's been changed
I would
since
think
we
so.
did the read through.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if the script that I have has the
Right.
same ending that you guys actually filmed.
Well,
But-
there's little changes here and there.
Could be a surprise.
I know. That's why I want to see it.
I'm looking
That's why
forward
everybody
to,
should see it.
I'm looking forward to seeing the production in its entirety as a whole, and and seeing it all performed. Like I said, when you're just in a couple of scenes and you know, in a small part of it, it's very different in a film. And I look forward to seeing the whole thing, and I look forward to friends and family coming to see it as well, and hopefully a lot of people in Erie, and a lot of good PR and a lot of success.
I'd like to see Erie folks turn out for it. Erie is a tough market.
Yep.
I had a grandfather that worked as a stagehand in vaudeville for a while, and he said that backstage in every vaudeville house in America, somebody would take a crayon and scrawl on the wall and said, "If you think you're good, play Erie," because there's always been a tough town. And it'd be nice to see people in Erie come, because I think they're going to get a kick out of recognizing the places that were shot.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of respects they're going to see people that they know in that film. Even if they didn't meet us personally, they still know the person that they saw.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I'd like to see it. I'd like to see the film get some national or maybe even international exposure, because in the very best stories, there are certain universal truths that people can relate to in a lot of different cultures and a lot of different places. And in a way, I think it's a measure of the success of your project if you can find a story, or if you can have a character that not only appeals to the people in one location, but you take it 3,000 miles away. Say, yeah, that's my Uncle Charlie up there on the screen, or that's my cousin, you know, Elroy over there, and it just. I'm hoping there's enough exposure that we can see if there's a universality to this thing that does translate.
And there's a great sense of anticipation, knowing that the release is coming. It's still months away, but that's one of the great things about it, is the anticipation of waiting for that, for the release. Erie was one of the stars of the film, so for local people, they should come to see it for that reason alone. But even when you go beyond Erie, I think there are a lot of things that should attract people to the film on a number of levels. Number one, the themes of the film that we've already discussed, but it's a combination. It's of drama, mystery, romance. There's an international flavor to it. Where there are scenes that take place overseas, and it's a great story. It's a feel-good story. Frankly, it's a good date movie. There's romance in it. The guy gets the girl. And it's a story of success. Somebody, and I think we've all felt ourselves, from a personal standpoint, going through times of adversity and hardship, and Oliver experiences that, and he comes out in the end a much stronger and wiser person. So it just
We
for a
assume
lot
it's
of
a
reasons.
happy ending because we haven't seen it.
We hope so, but yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how it all plays out.
I also hope that you don't have to reshoot any of these scenes because of Matt's haircut.
Yeah. He joined, yeah. Join the skinheads.
That's for our skinhead movie we're doing.
That's the sequel. Oliver joins the skinheads, right? Yeah.
That's the evil twist.
You've finally come over to our side.